everyone. My name is Monica Ricosi, and welcome to the Fashion and Sustainability Summit. The 2020 series is a collaboration of Fashion Decks and LIM College. The summit is sponsored by EcoLife Yarns, producing sustainable yarns for over 60 years, and the first in the world to spin recycled fiber yarn. It is also sponsored by Kendor Textiles, specializing in environmentally and socially responsible textiles, as well as the Accessories Council. This is week 15, and we are about to have a conversation on material sustainability. Speakers today are Jorge Mataix of Belda Llorens, Alexandra McNair of Fashion Forward, Sharon Rowe of Eco Bags Products, Mark Messura of Cotton Incorporated, and Alex Hartley of The Gap Incorporated. Lead moderator is Dorothy Crouch of California Apparel News, and Bettina Hobson, graduate of LIM College. Up first, I would like to introduce Mark Messura.
Great. Well, welcome everyone. I am the Senior Vice President for Global Supply Chain Marketing at Cotton Incorporated, and I'm delighted to be a part of this program. In my work at Cotton Incorporated, I get to interact with retailers, brands, and manufacturers throughout the world to help them on any aspect of their cotton business, which includes things like sustainability and innovation and performance. So I'm pleased to be a part of this program today. For all of you in the industry, as well as university and faculty, we have a tremendous resource, free resource that's available to you, and that's Cotton Works. This is an amazing website with information, technical assistance, all the different aspects of what you need to know about cotton and cotton product. And just to give you a flavor, just in the sustainability area alone, we have a variety of information, everything from biodegradability to recycling, life cycle assessment for cotton, circularity, many of the different things. All of these different topics, all of these very, very important aspects of sustainability are all in one place. So I would encourage all of you to go to the Cotton Works site to register, it's free, and make use of this information about sustainability, a great background and more depth to the important topics that we're going to address today. Thank you. This is the Cotton Works site again, and it is free registration. So if you're not familiar with it, please click on it and explore the site. I look forward to our conversation today.
Thank you so much, Mark. Up next, we have Jorge.
Hello, everyone, and nice to see you again here on the Fashion Den group and all the audience. My name is Jorge Mataix. I am the owner and CEO of Belda Llorens. We are specialized on recycled fibers and recycled sustainable fibers yarns. Well, we are, as I was saying to you, our contribution to the sustainable textiles are basically because we are one of the major producers of recycled cotton yarns in the world. Not only that, we also use recycled polyester coming from the collected bottles all over the world. And we also use recycled viscose in blended with Ecovero, sustainable Ecovero fiber as well. We are not only using recycled fibers, but also we do recycle our own internal waste in the production process, okay? Part of it, we reuse it in the yarn, and part of it is used by other spinning plants or for other industrial purposes. We are also involved in post-consumer programs by reusing goods as towels or bed linens and introducing in the new yarns in a 10% percentage. We are also involved with the retailers in circular economy programs where they collect their cuttings of the retails and on the confections, and they select it by color and content, and then we use it again and we make a yarn that they use for their collections, okay? And besides this, we are also in projects of a new biodegradable recycled polyester project, and also in Europe, we are in this moment leading a new sustainable fiber coming from the agriculture, specifically for the tomato waste plants. This is a picture where you can see more or less what will be in 1,000 kilos of yarn or 2,000 pounds yarn in regarding the water consumption. In the left side, you will see what are the consumption of our yarn in green, in 100% cotton, which the composition is 60% recycled cotton and 40% BCI cotton, comparing with 100% conventional virgin cotton or 100% organic cotton. As you can see, organic cotton, it's not using as much as chemicals, but it's using a little bit more water than conventional cotton. On the right side, we can see also the difference of one of our most sustainable yarns, which is 50% recycled polyester and 50% recycled cotton, comparing with the conventional polyester cotton or conventional polyester organic cotton. In this picture, we translate and we want to show in a product like a t-shirt, product of 180 grams, what will be the consumption of these parameters on CO2 emissions, water, energy, and chemical consumption, and what will be the savings by using Ecolife yarns comparing with the other conventional cotton or organic cotton. As you can see, using Ecolife yarns, there is a saving of 98% of a t-shirt in consumption of water, or 67% of savings in the emissions of CO2. Okay, thank you very much. You can also see our documentation in our website. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Jorge. Up next, I'd like to introduce Sharon.
Okay, hi everybody. I'm Sharon Rowe. I'm the founder and CEO of EcoBags Products. Our brand is EcoBags. We're the original reusable bag. And I'm also the author of The Magic of Tiny Business. And really where we started was we wanted to solve a problem by introducing reusable bags without creating more problems. So we, from the very beginning, and I think this is important, we baked into our approach to business a do no harm philosophy, which brought us to from seed to sown. And we were just very lucky. I'd have to say from the very beginning, we started in Europe, but then we quickly moved to India and discovered this entire world of cotton, and specifically organic cotton, recycled cotton. And this is going back to the late 90s, early 2000s, even before that. We saw what was happening in Europe. And because we were working with people who were also working with Europeans, we knew that would be a direction. It took forever for it to take off in the United States. But I guess basically what I'll just like to say here in the beginning is that if you start with some core values, you can follow them through pretty easily now if you have the resources. And I'm thrilled to be here to share whatever I know, but I'm also very excited to have met now Jorge, because he may have some products that I can use with regards to recycled. When I started, the recycled yarn industry wasn't really burgeoning yet, but there was access to conventional cotton, and certainly organic came, and then recycled, actually, in that order for me. Social responsibility, how much people want, consumers want to be socially responsible. It's way easier now than it was 30 years ago. These are happy workers and my girlfriend Ellen. This is me with a co-op, an organic co-op in India, because it's very important to understand that cotton is basically the fabric of a lot of societies. And when you don't use organic cotton, you're sort of pulling away from that sustainable aspect of social society. I think I have one more. Nope, that's it. I couldn't remember.
Thank you so much, Sharon. At this point, I'd like to introduce our next two speakers, Alexandra McNair and Alice Hartley. If you could.
I can go ahead. This is Alice. Hi. Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here. So I am Director of Product Sustainability for Gap Inc. I think most people are probably familiar with Gap brand, but Gap Inc. is a portfolio company that also includes Banana Republic, Old Navy, and then some smaller brands, Intermix, Janie and Jack, and Athleta. So in that capacity, my work is largely focused in two areas. So I'm part of the Gap Inc. Global Sustainability team, meaning that we do a lot of work upstream in our supply chain. So with our own internal supply chain partners, and then the people that they work with, the garment factories, the textile mills, and then all the way back to the fields and the farms where raw materials come from. And then the other half of my job is working with our brands. So as brands are becoming more and more interested in sustainability, and there really does feel like there's this cultural tide happening where customers are starting to be more aware, which has really led our brands just in the last few years that I've been able to witness to be more interested in sustainability themselves. And what does this mean for product development? How do you work it into both our brand strategy and then the seasonal sort of day-to-day work of creating product and putting it out there in the world? So part of my role is helping them navigate that sometimes confusing journey, and then thinking strategically about what their goals are. So for anyone who wants to learn more about what Gap Inc. is doing, things like our science-based targets and our commitment to reducing our impacts on climate change, as well as our water commitments and our work with especially our programs related to women in the supply chain, I would direct you to our Gap Inc. sustainability website. It's really easy to find, just gapincsustainability.com, and all of our goals and our programs are there.
Thank you, Alice. Alexandra, would you please introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Alice, for that. I'm Alexandra McNair. I'm the founder and CEO of Fashion Forward. We're a nonprofit, and we're on a mission to eliminate the negative effects on humans and the environment from the chemicals that are used in the fashion industry. There's a great impact on, a negative impact on workers, on water, on communities that surround those manufacturing facilities, and on us as a consumer. So we are kind of at the center, I would say at the center of consumers and industry. And so we educate both consumers and industry on what they can do to drive the industry towards safer chemical use, but also on responsible purchase, a way to shop more responsibly. So we are, a lot of what, if you were to visit our website at fashionfwd.org, we're very focused on educating consumers with different resources. What does different certifications mean around harmful chemicals? So we'll talk a little bit more about that later today. But what certifications can you look for? What brands can you shop from? A big part of what we're doing to drive the industry is focusing on the brand leaders. So what brands are doing a really good job? Gap is certainly one of them. What brands are doing a really good job around responsible chemical use and promoting them so that we can drive competition to the top. We're really excited to be on this panel, and look forward to sharing more information with you.
Thank you all so much. At this point, I would like to introduce our lead moderator, Dorothy Crouch. Dorothy, take it away.
Thank you, Monica. Welcome, everyone. As Monica mentioned, my name is Dorothy Crouch, and I'm the managing editor at California Apparel News. In 2020, we are reflecting on our 75 fashionable years in business, during which we've covered the apparel industry and fashion beat. Let's begin our conversation on material sustainability. Jorge, I'd like to start with you. When thinking about materials used in fashion, what are some of the more offensive culprits that were used in the recent past, but are now being replaced? And what types of eco-friendlier supplies are now being used in their place?
Yeah, well, I'm saying that from my point of view as a young spinner, I think that in the past, where we were using too much acrylic fibers and many fibers coming from the petrol, using natural resources. Okay, I think now we have a variety of new fibers that are being used now and are considered, especially in the last years, fibers as the recycled cotton, as I was mentioning before, recycled polyester, recycled nylon, recycled wool, recycled viscose, and other sustainable fibers, not only recycles, are also getting involved in this new business as the Tencel, as the modal, as the Ecovero, as organic fibers, the organic cotton. And many of these companies that what are trying, even we are not perfect, but I think that these sustainable fibers, what are trying is to improve their processes and trying to get much less much less environmental impact to the planet by using less water. Okay, and these are mainly the new fibers that are taken in consideration in the new fashion industry.
Excellent, thank you. Would anybody else like to respond to that question?
Sure, I can jump in on that point.
Thank you, Alice.
Yeah, just something I would share is that in apparel, the big fibers are actually fairly small. So between polyester, cotton, and then cellulosics, so things like rayon and viscose, that covers a pretty vast majority of what is in our apparel portfolio. And then there's kind of a long tail of other materials. So I think something that's maybe not super well known, maybe among this audience more so than elsewhere, but that rayon and viscose start out life as trees. So that material comes from from a forest originally. And I think in recent years, there's been some really good work by groups like Canopy to pay more attention to the forestry practices where those trees are coming from and the land rights and things like that. And I think also kind of not hidden, but lesser known is that to get something like a wood pulp into a nice soft material, you often have to use a lot of chemicals to make that transformation. So I think that's another just area where there's maybe some surprises behind the scenes that not everybody knows about.
Excellent points, yes, and extremely important. Mark, I'd like to start the next question with you. There is a lot of talk in the apparel industry about utilizing recycled materials, including cotton, nylon, rPET. What are some of the challenges with recycling products, and what excites you the most about the advancements in these recycled materials that are used in apparel manufacturing?
Yeah, it's a good point to raise, because I think we have to look at apparel as more than just the initial product. So circularity, the whole concept of circularity is really key. So with respect to something like cotton, you have about 80% of the world's cotton fiber that ends up in apparel. 10 to 15% of it is in home textiles, sheets, towels, pillowcases. And then 5%, but growing, are all these other uses for fiber, for cotton. Everything from cotton in money to cotton as promoting adhesion in tires that are in cars, to the non-woven category, disposable wipes, diapers, products like that. And certainly with the single-use plastics directive coming out of the EU, we're looking at how do we provide more solutions to the industry as they look at options. So we have cotton substrates for non-woven white products and all, which is related to the concept of recycling, because if you can take cotton from apparel, and we want to make the best yarns possible in apparel with cotton, and that means length and strength to the individual fibers. But when you recycle that from apparel, you tend to go against that. You tend to chop it up, and you tend to get less strength and less length. And that actually works in the opposite direction of making a better yarn. So while cotton can be recycled into yarn for clothing, a lot of our effort has been looking at what else can you do with it. So some products, like for example, taking cotton and recycling it back into filament for 3D printers to create things like buttons that are made out of natural materials rather than plastic. So that's something that can be done with cotton. Cotton clothing, garnetted, mean chopped up, fine fibers could be used in additive manufacturing. This is made with cotton and corn. This replaces plastic. So this is the way we have to think about it. So these are some of the opportunities. And again, just the challenge in recycling is to think differently. It may not be apparel back into apparel. It may be cotton apparel back into a whole variety of other things.
That's fantastic and fascinating what you're doing. Anybody else want to weigh in on the challenges of recycling different products?
Yeah, I'd like to say too that there's always post-consumer recycling, but you have to also look at post-industrial, which would be the step before it even becomes a yarn. And what I found in working in India is that nothing really gets wasted. So even the smallest yarns are I mean, is it technically recycled? They call it recycled. Does it match our definition of recycled? It's not post-consumer, because there's a lot of resources that go into capturing something that's already out in the market. And there's a cost to that, and there's an environmental hit. There's just a lot that goes into that. But if you can capture it at the beginning so that nothing goes into the waste stream, and then that has a circular life of its own, you're adding that, value.
No, excellent point. And also, just even though we have the same goal with recycling, just the different ways that it can be interpreted depending on the business or the region.
And again, what Mark said, there's high value products, like let's say just high end apparel, and then there's stuff that I do, which is a bag. So I mean, you have to really decide: do you use the finest yarn for your bed sheets or a tote bag? So
exactly. Thank you very much. And Alexandra, I'd like to ask you next about the conversation regarding sustainability. It has often focused on how fashion impacts the environment, yet it must also include issues surrounding ethical manufacturing, such as fair wages, factory conditions, labor practices, encouraging worker education, and providing a safe, equitable working environment. Have you noticed these issues gaining more space within the sustainable materials conversation?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, one area that really impacts workers that hasn't been on the radar for many sustainability teams and is now kind of surfacing is more around the use of safer chemicals. Chemicals are, workers are up close with these chemicals almost in every stage of the manufacturing process. There are chemicals used, and as a brand or within the industry, it's very important for these companies to be thinking about different certifications, Blue Sign, OCATEX, the Global Organic Textile Standard. Many consumers, and on the consumer side, I think as a consumer, you think that, if you buy organic, that you're protecting workers along and throughout the supply chain, and you're buying a product that might be safe for you and your family. But on the other hand, organic clothing only protects the farmers. And so when you think of how can I purchase a product that's safe not only for the farmer, but also safe for the workers and safe for my family, I always recommend GOTS. It stands for the Global Organic Textile Standard. And it's a really great certification for kind of a holistic certification for both social and environmental impact that I like to share with others. So
excellent, thank you. And would anybody else like to weigh in on how more ethical manufacturing and attention to the worker conditions is gaining more space within the conversation of sustainable materials?
I'll speak. I've had fair wage and fair trade since 1989, and I'd like to say that it probably only started really perking up about 3 years ago. And that's even within the natural products industry.
That's an excellent point, because we've seen that, I think, it kind of trickles down. So you get it from food industry first, and then it kind of comes into consumer products and apparel. And I've noticed those trends.
I mean, there are a lot of niche conversations,
Yes.
like if you start again with the smaller natural product stores, and then you went to Whole Foods, and now Wegmans has, blah, blah, blah. It's the same thing for apparel in terms of how it starts small, it seeds out, and then it takes over. And it's only, I'd say, it's still a limited conversation, but it's a very big conversation in the smaller group of people for whom it is really a big concern.
Yes, exactly. No, hopefully it'll continue expanding, and we can have more empathy, more mindful purchasing in the near future. Alice, I'd like to come over to you. We know that consumers are becoming more educated regarding the origins of their clothes, supply chain, and the environmental impacts from their purchases. How informed are consumers regarding the materials used to make their clothes, and how should the apparel industry be responding?
Yeah, well, I'll pick up on a point that you just made, which is that the food industry has kind of plowed this path for us. So I think there's the most recognition and uptake of terms like organic and fair trade, because you've maybe walked into a store and seen that on your coffee or on your chocolate. So those I think have pretty good awareness. Some of the other there's a proliferation of certifications out there. Some are more recognizable than others. But those two I think have pretty good resonance with consumers. And then also probably around animal welfare. And I think that is probably a carryover from the food industry as well. You can go into a Whole Foods and there's a whole color-coded animal welfare rating system. And our industry is not quite there yet, but we're becoming more aware of those issues and finding some common language to talk about them. So to the question of how informed are they, I think there's been a big shift, like Sharon was saying, and maybe just the last 3-4 years. I think consumers are just getting smarter and more sophisticated about how you ask questions, and not taking everything that you see at face value, but really being able to drill in a more sophisticated way. I think the term sustainable gets thrown about in loose sort of ways, and the more people can ask, okay, well, what do you mean by that? What exactly are you saying is more sustainable? Is it because it's recycled, or is it because it's organic? And are there any trade-offs that get introduced, which there often are. So I think this is, I see it as sort of this force of nature moving us all towards greater transparency. I think in this day and age, and with people able to just get information at their fingertips on their phone, transparency is just the direction that everything will continue to go. So it's in everyone's interest to be upfront and admit when they only have a partial solution, and then assume that information is just going to get out there. So I think that's a real force for accountability in our industry.
No, and you make a good point about even if it's a smaller step, or it's a partially sustainable effort, just to be clear about that and what exactly their intentions are. Jorge, did you want to weigh in on this?
Yes, I would like to talk a little bit about this, because I did on my last meeting here and on Fashion Desk, and I think it's a very important point, the communication part. I think that other industries like agriculture industry or automotive industry has made major efforts to get into the final consumer. I think that if you realize the electric cars are sold and the consumer are looking for it, and also the organic food, there is already stores specialized on that. I think the retail and the brands still are missing that part. Okay, I think that it's not enough just to put a hand tag on a composition out there. It's not enough. I think that the sustainable textiles has to be separated and get the proper information to the final customer, especially now with the pandemic, that there is a lot of customers that are now looking for sustainable textiles. They need to see why those textiles are sustainable. What are the properties? What are the bondage of those textiles? And this is something that I'm missing, because I think we are making the sustainability more inside of the industrial part. Okay, it's just getting into the industrial part. And I think we still have a lot of things to do in order to get into the final consumer. And I think something my friend Alice can put a lot of effort into the retail business to get into those consumers.
Excellent. Thank you, Jorge. And
Can I piggyback
Sharon?
on that really?
Yes.
And sorry, I just wanted to piggyback on that real quickly. Just what Jorge was saying. I think it's especially around chemicals, harmful chemicals. Consumers are looking for products more than ever that are safe, that are not toxic, both for their families and for them. And I think one thing the industry can do a little bit better is talking about what they're doing around chemical management. I've evaluated over 150 of the largest brands in the US, and about 30% are really talking about it, about what they're doing. And I think as a consumer, we want to know, where can we shop? Who's really caring for us, and who's caring for the workers as well. So it'd be good to have a little bit more transparency, as Jorge was saying, around, you know, my line of work around, you know, chemical.
So that's an excellent point. Thank you for adding that. Yes, exactly. Because we do need to know what's going into clothing, textiles, all along the supply chain. We need to be able to trace the origins of everything, every component. Sharon, I would like to come over to you. What is the single most important piece of information on circularity or material sustainability that our guests should take from today's panel?
Well, I think I'm just going to reiterate something that was said, but hopefully in a slightly different way, which is there's a lot of people talking about this now, and there weren't a lot of people talking about it a few years ago. And when you get a lot of people talking about it, could be a lot of confusion. And I hear all the time, what does sustainability mean? So I think that term has kind of lost its weight. It needs to be redefined. It needs to be rearticulated. And what I think is really important is that you align yourself and leverage platforms that are already out there. Alexandra mentioned GOTS, the Global Organic Textile Standards. All of our organic cotton is GOTS. That's a platform that you can stand on, and then it's not just you, a lone voice. You've got a wealth of information behind you. There's also the Organic Trade Association has a really active fiber council. I can't say that I'm actually really active with it, but I read about it. That's another really great platform. There's also the certifications that you should be looking at, like the SA8000. You can stand on that. And a lot of these certifications and platforms overlap with their requirements. And then a lot of times you need to certify your certifiers. So for people who are involved in sourcing materials, you have to go where they're sourced, and you have to build real relationships with people, and you have to build trust. And that takes years. And you can't just agree, just say, sure, you said that, you checked off all these boxes, that's what you're doing. I mean, at least in my world, that doesn't work. You have to work with people who you know and can trust, and again, leverage the platforms that they're standing on or they're participating in. And then within that, you've got B Corporation for all the social standards. You've got the Social Venture Circle for all the people who have been doing this work for 30, 40 years. You've got, all the small starters, many of whom, like myself, never grew to be gigunda. You don't have to be a major corporation to see the movement that you want to see in the world. But you have to be successful to participate, but you can't participate unless you stay connected to the why you started to do it in the first place. And that would be for designers. Of course you want to make some great clothes, but do you want to make them while other people are suffering to make them? You've got to connect the dots, because the integration is not just in materials, it's in the social fabric.
Excellent, thank you for that. And you mentioned some excellent resources, extremely helpful for our audience. Thank you. At this time, we're going to come over to Bettina Hobson for our attendee Q&A. Bettina?
You know what? I'll start, if that's okay.
Thank you, Andrea.
We got one question emailed in, which we often do, and I had already put it in the box to Bettina. Asking about regenerative farming practices and in the US. They're reading about that in terms of material sustainability. Is any of that going on in the US? Would any of you like to take that, please? Take it away, Mark.
Yeah, let's first define it. Regenerative is probably the new word that everybody's latching onto, and like sustainability, people will get tired of it in a couple of years and we'll come up with something. But it's a serious concept. Regenerative means doing the best we can to improve soil health and make the best growing conditions. So there is a tremendous amount of work going on in the US that's sponsored by and paid for by US cotton farmers and companies like Gap and others that are part of the Cotton Research and Promotion Program that are investing in these efforts. So what does it mean? It means projects looking at soil health improving soil health so that you can use less fertilizers. You use less fertilizers, you reduce greenhouse gas. So these are some of the connections that are out there. Soil health is like a website to a retailer. It's your face to your customer. It's where you make your money. So that's what a farm is. So controlling the health of the soil, looking at everything from erosion control to best practices, no-till farming, where you're not driving through the farm fields any more than you have to. The use of cover crops. Most farmers are using that, and that is a growing practice. What are cover crops? It means instead of bare soil, you plant some other crop and let that both preserve the soil, you get less runoff or less erosion, but you also get root structures. Root structures from other plants that mean then when you go plant the cotton in, you already have an aerated soil, or you have higher levels of microbes and worms and other beneficials. So those practices are out there, and soil health is getting a lot of attention right now. That's a very hot topic. Yeah. And that's what regenerative is really about.
And to add on to that point about is it happening in the US, it is. One great organization to check out if you want to learn more is called Fibershed. I know they have projects in California and elsewhere. And I also do know that Patagonia is working something called the Regenerative Organic Standard or certification. It's in its early days, so it's not as widely available as something like GOTS, but there is some really great work going on with that.
I know that they're bringing back cotton to the Carolinas too, just as an FYI. It's a very nascent stage, but it's coming back.
Thanks. I think we have a few more questions, if I may ask. It's been a great panel so far, and so much good information. So we have a question from Cynthia Esser Albo. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that last name. And the question was, what is the most sustainable silk? So kind of a textile fiber question. And maybe if we had Alexandra, maybe you could start us off with that?
Yeah, it's a difficult question to answer only because sustainability can mean so many things. You know, it can mean silk that was sewn by artisans or made in the U.S. or it could, with good labor conditions. Or so in terms of sustainable silk, I think I would need a little bit more information. Maybe one of the other panelists has a brand that stands out to them.
Well, I think I can answer about that.
Thank you, Jorge.
Yeah, I think, the most sustainable silk that exists now is the recycled silk. I mean, there is a pre-consumer recycled silk, and the recycled pre-consumer silk is coming basically from the cuts, the cutting of confections of 100% fabrics made with virgin silk. Okay, this type of silk can be used in our system, in open-end system, has not the same properties in terms of quality of the virgin silk, but in a small percentage, like 10%, 20%, together with other yarns, can be used in a very nice product.
No, that was a great answer. I think it definitely cleared up the mystery there about an organic fiber, natural fiber. So we have more questions here. I'm seeing one from Rafaela Prado, and that is, what would be the best way to make sure the companies are sustainable? I mean, we've talked a lot about it, but one large organization to certify brands, mills, producers, I'm not sure. I think it's more of a regulation issue because we have quite a lot of pockets of bodies that kind of do things. I think GOTS was mentioned and some others, but I just wonder, since Alexandra, you mentioned GOTS earlier, would you maybe like to start the question, and if anyone else might like to join in?
Yeah, sure, I'm happy to. Yeah, I mean, there's so many different ways I could answer this question. So, one thing that brands can do really, as many know, the apparel industry has a very complicated supply chain. Most brands don't know past the first tier of of their suppliers. So it's a very complicated question to answer. making sure, first bringing on a sustainability team, people who can look into knowing and understanding and building relationships with your suppliers, so that establishing trust there, so that you can work with your suppliers to ensure that they are following your supply chain policies. Brands can create first step, create a supply chain policy. What do you want in order for you to work with a certain supplier, you as a supplier have to meet these standards in order for us to work with you. And so I think it's up to both the supplier, but also the brand to set themselves up with policies and standards, so that they can work together to move things forward. But it is very complicated. Most brands don't know past the first tier. So I'm sure Alice has quite a bit of experience at Gap.
Yeah, tier 2 and 3 suppliers
that same question.
Are a good point. You mentioned about not having visibility past tier 1. So yeah, Alice, I would love to hear your input on that.
Yeah, I'll just say it is complicated. It would be amazing if there was just one single source of truth on this question, but unfortunately I don't think there is today. There's different standards and certifications for different dimensions of sustainability, whether we're talking about animal rights or impacts to water or impacts to people. It's sort of can feel like the Wild West sometimes. So there's a real need to have more common definitions and this shared language among the industry. I do think there's some really great momentum in that direction coming from the Sustainable Apparel Coalition, which is a great organization to check into if you want to learn more about what companies are doing, because they have developed some rigor around how you evaluate factories. So they have their facility environmental module is a common set of metrics that different factories and vendors around the world can use. So at least you're speaking the same language and starting to compare apples to apples when somebody says how much energy or water or what the chemical impacts are of their manufacturing. And so that's a step in the right direction if we can all start at least measuring ourselves by the same stick, and then we can have conversations about what does better improvement look like. And there is, related to that, some work coming, looking at the product scale, which I think is probably of interest to this conversation. So a module on how to evaluate a single product in a similar way. So trying to get a level playing field in terms of how we quantify the impacts as we're designing products. So when that work is fully mature, hopefully that becomes a basis for being able to get down to a quantified level of comparison. And then I think on top of that foundation of info is how you then build a sort of robust consumer-facing standard or label of some kind. I think a key point to make there is that it's a lot of information to digest, and the average person looking at a hang tag for a fraction of a second in a store, it's a bit overwhelming to try to get all that information in one place. So we need to know what it is, but we also need to distill it down so that it's understandable and more consumer friendly.
That's great information. And I think I see two hands here. Sharon, first, Alice, I wanted to thank you. That was great information. But Sharon, I think you had a question, and then I think Dorothy wanted to weigh in too, and then we have another question as well. That's a good segue to that. But Sharon, please.
Sure. I just want to address the fact that though not everybody's a major brand out there, and what I found is a smaller brand that it's hard to get access to the information and the criteria that the larger brands are working on. And even some of the organizations have paywalls that don't allow smaller brands to have access. So I think a step in the right direction would be for the larger brands to open their doors and share what they're doing so that the language can be shared. Because if somebody's starting out really, there's so much out there to digest. And a lot of the work's already been done.
Yes.
So it shouldn't just be for a profit for a brand. It should be for the world.
I think the sustainable space, we're starting to see more sharing and collaboration, but yeah, I definitely agree. Before we go to our next question, Dorothy, I think you were going to mention something.
Yes, briefly, I just wanted to mention that while it's not really a governing body, familiarizing yourself with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals is.
Sorry, I'm a big
please,
advocate.
it's exciting.
I'm a big advocate for the SDGs.
Yes, exactly, or the SDGs. That's an excellent help. I've had a number of, when I'm interviewing mills or brands, and they come to me and they say, we are adhering to these tenets of the SDGs. Maybe they are not reaching every single one, but they reveal how they are working toward accomplishing every single goal. And they tell you which ones they have accomplished. So that is extremely useful to familiarize yourself with those goals and ask those questions to your suppliers. So
there's tools on their website for the UN Global Compact too that you can use in your business, and you can say what SDG you want to use and which one you want to connect. So there's quite a bit of information out there for that. So you brought up a great point. But we do have another question that's kind of a good segue to that. And I think maybe I'd like to ask Sharon this first, and maybe Alice as well, is how much more are consumers willing to pay for sustainable products that do a good job of communicating authentic, transparent story? They have the different dimensions of sustainability from environmental to social. And that's from a question from Wesley Burgess.
Mm-hmm. I think in the beginning, I mean, I know that when we started with organic cotton, we actually priced it competitively with conventional cotton to get it into the space. So we were willing to reduce our margin in order to get it out there. But still there's this perception that organic costs more. And I'm only speaking for organic fibers and cotton fibers because I don't know about the world in terms of recycled fiber, poly and whatnot. I think the consumers come a long way. They don't want to pay more. So how much more? I'd say max 30%. I mean, I'm not in an apparel, I'm more in a lifestyle product or accessory business. So max 30% for myself. I mean, I'll just come at it. I try to look to buy organic whenever I can, and I'll look for the sales because everything goes on sale eventually.
No, that's a good point. There may be a threshold there, and I think maybe Allison, Jorge, and I think I saw even Mark raise his hand. So Alice, maybe you can shed some light on that as well.
Yeah, speaking from a brand point of view, I'd say it does depend on which brand we're talking about. So just within our own portfolio, Old Navy is our value brand. And then at the other end of the spectrum would be Athleta or Intermix. We definitely see the Athleta customer really, they share the same values around sustainability as the brand. And so in that brand, I think it's a lot easier to connect through marketing and how you explain things to your customer because they are looking for that information and they'll go a little bit deeper to try to find it. And so I think with that comes a tolerance for a higher price point around product, and maybe that makes it easier for the brand to source organic fibers or recycled fibers or whatever it might be. So I think there's really a range. The other thing is that I think people will say that they will pay more, and that doesn't always happen in practice. So I've seen a lot of consumer insight studies about what people, what they're thinking when they maybe walk into a store. But I think what we need is more empirical data about how do people actually respond to product, and depending on what you say about the product and explain what you've done behind the scenes. There's so much in apparel and fashion that you don't see on the surface, right? Everything from the water impacts to, maybe how that animal was raised. So there's a lot of explaining to do. And I think that we just have so much more to learn about what is going to strike a note with people and how much to tell them.
Sure. Great. Thank you. Mark, I saw you raise your hand. Did you want to weigh in on this before we move to our next question?
Yeah, just a quick thought. There is a lot of information about willingness to pay, and it is very consistent with what Alice just described. People are more aware of sustainability and environmental issues, but that does not translate into willingness to pay. We would like to think that, we would like to hope that, but for most people, especially in the US market, that's not the case. That doesn't mean that it's not important. It just means that for a lot of products like apparel, fit, style, and price will continue to be the dominant drivers of why people choose the clothing they buy. It doesn't mean that sustainability is not important. It just means that it still hasn't evolved enough to really make an impact among the different factors that affect purchasing decisions. And there's a wealth of research available on that. And Cotton Incorporated and on our Cotton Works site, you can find it. We've been tracking that for over 20 years. And as the attention for sustainability has grown, you still see the same purchase drivers in clothing.
Great, thank you.
I will say that when it comes to products that affect you personally, so like organic food, there's a whole market for organic food out there because it impacts us as consumers. And sadly, we're much more driven just by what impacts us than what impacts the workers or the environment. So I'd say when it comes to, safe, non-toxic clothing, I think that's a growing area where people are going to be paying more attention because it is personal.
Great, thank you. I think we have maybe just time for maybe one last question. So Jorge and Mark, I think I'd like to bring you in on this. And that is from Catherine Meehan, I believe. It's, can you comment on the various recycled fibers such as recycled cotton, polyester, blends of recycled fibers? How are they priced and compared to virgin fibers? Maybe percentage terms or, discount margins?
Okay. This question is also related with the previous one. I mean, it's not,
yes.
not necessarily by using a recycled yarn or recycled fiber, the final product has to be a higher cost, okay? Another thing, in fact, I'm gonna tell you guys something. My father invented this business of recycled cotton 40 years ago. And it was not because it was a sustainable problem in that time, in the 70s. It was an economical reason. And the fact of getting recycled cotton and not using virgin and dyeing was cheaper than the virgin fiber, the virgin process. So in fact, there is a lot of products made with recycled fibers that are the same price and are as competitive as any virgin fibers. Another thing, and this is my point of view, I think that sustainability is related with value, okay? I mean, I think that I was mentioning before, the agriculture and the electric cars has a value because the consumer has to appreciate that value. But it's our job to transmit this value to the final consumer. And I think that the sustainability is also related with a responsible consumption of the goods. I don't think
it's what Tesla did for electric cars. They made a product the consumer wanted. Yeah,
exactly. And I think that the sustainability is not related with the cheap products. Sustainability is more related with value and with responsible consumption from the customer. Okay, and I think that this has to be taken in consideration from the people,
sure.
From the people and the retail or the small brands making this type of goods. I'm not saying that the price has to be really high, but it has to be a fair price, but nothing really cheap. I think that the cheap goods provokes a big consumer, and the big consumption of goods, of textile goods, are not related with sustainability. That's my point of view.
Oh, thank you so much, Jorge. I definitely agree. Mark, before you want to give your final, before I turn it over to Dorothy, please?
Yeah, just a final comment, I guess, as we go around. These are a lot of great issues that have been touched on and a lot of great questions. I would encourage everybody to really seek out the science and the facts. There's lots of opinions, but there are clear facts and there's good science. And there are sources, and many of the groups involved here today are part of the effort to bring the science and the facts. I know, again, Alice and the efforts at Gap are a great example of that. And yes, a big company, but a big company investing the resources that all of us can use. So though the science, the resources, the information, it's out there and it's being shared broadly. So that's a very, very positive thing. And I, again, would just finally say, at the cottonworks.com site, we have a lot of this information, a lot of these studies, that we do with the industry, with companies, and we make that available to everyone, any company, anywhere in the world.
Thank you, Mark. Dorothy, I'll turn that back over to you. Or
Thank you so much. I wanted to, before we wrap up, maybe in less than 20 seconds, each panelist have one final question. What are some small steps attendees can take today to further the conversation on material sustainability? We'll go down the line. Jorge, we'll start with you.
Can you repeat the question, please?
What are some small steps attendees can take today to further the conversation on material sustainability?
What are the farthest steps? Well, I think that we should keep informing the people, and I insist on the communication. I think this is really important, that things like we are doing now, these webinars are really important, these associations, and the communications in the school, in the high schools, in the universities. And this is something that we have to put into the mind of the people. And that's, for me, the key. To me, that is the key.
Excellent.
For success of all these materials and all of this industry.
Excellent, thank you. Alexandra?
I would say buy Okotex, GOTS, Cradle to Cradle certified products. I would say buy consignment. There's so many great consignment stores out there that are just you know, been worn once or sometimes never been worn, but they're just as fun as going shopping for the first time. And so those would be my big ones.
Mark?
Yeah, my comment would be that there are lots of solutions when it comes to material sustainability. There often are not single choices of right or wrong, because like with all the choices in sustainability, it's a matter of trade-off. Is it more greenhouse gas or better water efficiency? How do you weigh these things? So I encourage people to really look into these things. They're not easy topics, but there really aren't a lot of just black and white decisions here. There are a lot of different trade-offs, and look at what makes sense for your business and your sustainability goals for your company.
Perfect, thank you. Alice, what would you say? Small steps.
Yeah, small steps, something that everybody can do, especially while we're all stuck at home. I would say audit your closet. Spend 20 minutes and look at all the labels, get to know what type of fibers are in your clothes. Look for whether they're pure fibers or if they're blends of lots of different types of fibers, and think about what that means for its ultimate recyclability. And also just pay attention to the percent of stuff you actually wear versus the things you thought were a good idea at the time and it's been gathering dust in your closet. Because the more that we start to be more conscious about buying things that we really are going to love and hang on to, that's really the ultimate goal, is shifting how we consume.
Perfect, thank you. And Sharon, what would you say?
I'd say that each one of us, and everybody, including everybody who's on this virtually, has to understand that we're leaders, or participating in the leadership of a cultural shift. And to that end, you really need to look at what do you value the most, and really abide by those values, personally and in your business. And practically, as a consumer, don't buy fast fashion. Agreed with going to resale shops and whatnot. And then use the organizations that are out there to inform you and to cross-reference that information with the brands that you love, to make sure and hold them accountable, because your dollar holds them accountable.
Excellent. Perfect. Thank you so much, everyone. I will send it back to, I think, Andrea or Monica. And I'm grateful for everyone's participation today. It's fantastic.
Yes, I'll say thank you to everybody. Thank you to the speakers, the moderators, the attendees, and most importantly, a big thank you to our sponsors, EcoLife Yarns, Kendor Textiles Limited, and the Accessories Council. I invite you to sign up for next week, week 16. We're going to be talking about reducing waste and having a conversation on sustainability, sizing, and garment fit. Speakers will be Jamie Campbell of Human Solutions of North America, Jessica Couch of Luxor and Fitch, Travis Wells in apparel production, and Jolie Bond in athletic. We have moderator David Burnett of B&B, as well as Bettina Hobson a graduate from LIM College. We invite you to visit fashiondex.com/store to see the latest in books and online sourcing. And that is all for today. We hope to see you next week. Have a good day.